Welcome to the Hybrid Human Podcast. My name is Zach Ryan, and each week myself and my co-host Chase Price will be exploring the intersection of wellness, business, entrepreneurship, and more.
Get ready to learn, grow, and evolve with us on the Hybrid Human Podcast. We'll just jump into it. What's up, brother? How are you?
Doing good, man. How are you guys?
Good, man.
Good.
It's a pretty crazy story how we actually got linked up. So we were all just kind of chilling and in Vigory. Me and Zach were just having a meeting, getting some IVs or doing some compression or something. And we were talking about the pod, and you just happened to be sitting right next to us.
Yep.
You're like, what's up? You guys talking pod? Let's chat about pod. What's
Talk
up?
pod.
And we were just talking about guests we want to have on. We got to know you a little bit, realized that you were one of the partners who had founded Aruza Pest Control here in North Carolina. And I had heard of them. They're massive here in North Carolina. So we got linked up and wanted to have you on. So crazy, but thanks for popping on, brother. We appreciate it.
Dude, thanks for having me. Like, I'm stoked you guys are doing a podcast because, I mean, I started a podcast with my buddy, and then I kind of stepped back and another person came in with him as I'm kind of working on a different channel that I want to do myself. But I mean, dude, it's fun and it's exciting. And I mean, honestly, the rewards are huge. So it's like, there's no one really doing it here in Charlotte, right? Like, not too many people anyways. So it's kind of exciting to have some like local people
It is, man.
doing podcasts.
It is. And we connected separately leading up just to kind of get a little bit more background. So I've heard your story per se a little bit summarized, but I don't think Zach had. So if you could kind of summarize it a little bit for us from your come up to kind of founding Aruza, the struggles leading up to that point and how that came to be.
Yeah, man. So long journey.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Minnesota, small little farm town. Was always kind of one of those things where it's like, I loved my town. I loved all my people I grew up with, but it's like, I always knew that wasn't where I belonged, right? It's like, when you just like don't fit in somewhere really, it's like, okay, I'm not meant to be in this small little town. So I always knew, I had to get out and go somewhere bigger. I got the opportunity to move away from my house when I was 17, leave my mom and my sister and go move in with some older family friends of ours. Mostly the decision was so I was doing semi-professional mountain biking at the time. Right. The ability to train all year round and escape the Minnesota cold winters was very enticing to me. And so, my mom came home and was like, hey, would you want to move to Arizona? And I was like, yep, like no questions, like, and so now where I'm at, kind of looking back on some of these decisions I've made, I've kind of attached like one of my core values, my personal core values to like courage, right? Where it's like, I've just seen as I go back, right, that there's all these different pieces where courage played a big factor where I just, instead of like being fearful and being like, hesitant, I don't know. I'm just like, yeah, okay, let's do it, figure it out, right? And so moved to Arizona, ended up loving it, stayed there, lived there for 12 years. I got into fitness and gyms and managing LA Fitnesses out there. And then kind of led me into randomly door-to-door pest control sales, right? So I knew nothing about pest control. Growing up in Minnesota, like I don't even think we had pest control in the town I grew up in. But I was there was this front desk girl at my gym, and she was like, you'd be really good at pest control sales. I'm like, what the hell is pest control sales? Like, what is it? And so, over the period of time, I kind of met with the owners of the company because her brother-in-law was a partner with them somehow. And I kind of really love the idea. It's like work 5-6 months a year, make enough money to kind of do whatever you want the rest of the year. And having managed the gyms over the last 6 years, I was working like 6-7 days a week, 15-hour days. So I'm like, I could use a little, breathing room. So I finally just, again, took the courage, leave my salary, leave my bonuses, leave, all my pay. I just bought a house. So I was going to lock up my house for 6 months and move to Houston, Texas. And I was just like, okay, let's do this thing, right? And door-to-door sales is freaking brutal, dude.
Yeah, it'll humble your ass real quick.
Oh my gosh. I think I probably was like in tears, like probably the first like 3 weeks every night. Like, it's like, what am I doing, dude? Yeah. Like, did I make a mistake? But then I really picked it up. I had been doing sales forever, but it's just way harder being out there, like massive amounts of rejection, right? It's like, 200 no's a day, people cussing at you, spitting at you, slamming doors in your face, pulling guns on you. Just everything. And it makes it so hard to like maintain your composure. But I got the hang of it, and I ended up having a pretty good summer. And, I made enough money to where I could, basically enjoy the rest of the year and kind of fell in love with the lifestyle. Right. But, it's funny, like growing up, I always knew I kind of wanted to be a business owner or entrepreneur or something. Right. Cause I kind of came from like a entrepreneurial family. So it's like my grandpa and my grandma, they started their own company together, which is a pretty cool story in and of itself. My mom, had started her own company when she was just had me as a baby. So I always knew that was kind of what I wanted to do, right? But it's like now I'm doing pest control, and I'm like, oh man, like, I don't like that. I don't love this stuff, right? It's like, and then after every summer, you work so much, you're just burnt out that it's like you're like, I'm never doing this again. Like, this is my last year, never doing pest control. I'm gonna go get a normal 9-to-5 salary job and just coast, right? And then it's like, you get home, you take a couple months off, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to go back out, right? So I worked for that company for 6 years. When I was, 20, my mom had gotten remarried. My stepdad's family all lives out here in TKK, Fort Mill area, South Carolina. And so my parents bought a house out here, and, they were like, yo, you should move to Charlotte. And I was like, I'm getting older. If I stay in Arizona much longer, I'm probably gonna end up settling here, and then I'll be stuck here. So I'm like, I might as well just move now. And then at the same time, it was like, I'm leaving every year for 6 months. It's almost impossible to like, get settled or, maintain any relationships. So,
because you're living in Arizona and then spending the summers in Houston.
Yeah. Houston. I lived in San Antonio for 2 months one summer. I lived in Atlanta for 2 months, 2 different summers, but most of my time was spent in Houston. But yeah, so it's like, it's hard to date a girl and then be like, cool, I'm going to leave for 5-6 months. They're like, okay, peace. They always act like they're like committed, like, yeah, this would be fine. And then it's like about 2-3 weeks in, they're like, they just kind of fizzle off. Yeah. Cause you're working so much, it's not like you can really like have many conversations. So I was like, dude, if I keep doing this, like I'm going to be a bachelor forever. Right. And so I was like, I need to settle down. So I'm like, look, I might as well just start my own pest control company, right? And the only thing that really like made me have the courage and kind of confidence to do that was the fact that, hey, look, I know I can sell. Like I can sell, hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue for pest control. So like, even if it was just me and I slowly did it over the years, like, I could probably do something with this. And so I called my best friend who we met doing pest control sales. We were like randomly like assigned as roommates one year. And he was doing solar in San Diego at the time, door to door. And I called him like, hey man, let's go start a pest control company in Charlotte. And he's like, okay. And he kind of took a risk on me too. And we moved out here and moved into my parents' house and started Aruza, just 2 trucks, him and I. We went out and knocked the doors, sold the accounts, serviced the accounts. I was like taking all the phone calls, while I was out driving or in the field or whatever. And we kind of slowly grew it from there. And then things started really getting crazy, right? So it's like when we started it, we didn't really know exactly what we wanted it to be, right? We knew what the directions or the possibilities could be, right? It's like, okay, we can go this direction, kind of like the company we came from, which, we can do it really, really big, or we can kind of take it easy and sort of just, float with it. But we ended up going, obviously, the first route. Brought on a third partner who had, a pretty good sales team, was really good at recruiting. He actually had some capital too that we could kind of put into the business at the time, which, was important. And so that summer when he joined us, he brought 75 sales guys. We opened up Charleston and, we put on a bunch of accounts. It was crazy, super hectic, right? Like I was running around like a wild man. And then it's like, each year we kind of kept opening 2-3 new offices. We got up to where we had about 250 door-to-door guys each summer and about 100 full-time employees. And we had 9 markets. So we had, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. Then, business is crazy and partnerships can be difficult. And, it's like we just had different visions, like me and the other partners, like we just kind of had different visions at that time of what we would really want to do or kind of what our purpose was in the company. And so, you know, there was some turmoil there a little bit, and we just kind of agreed that, you know, it may be best to sort of sell the company and kind of let other people sort of take over, right? And so me and my original partner, we exited the business and we sold it to a private equity company last October.
Okay.
And I mean, it was crazy to think of what we did in just 6 years.
Yeah.
You know.
So you sold coming on about a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Let's rewind a little bit
Yep.
before. So there's so much that goes into this whole thing culminating in a sale last October. But prior to that, let's talk about knocking on doors, because that's something that I feel like I've heard so many stories of people who started knocking on doors, but they become successful through that grind of through constantly being told no, no, no. Oftentimes, it's most often immigrants because that immigrant mentality, we've all heard about that, because they just refuse to take no for an answer, or they just continue to fight through adversity. How much of a role did that play for you, being told no, no, no so many times to eventually get a yes and then get momentum that way? Did that play a big role in later on as you began to grow the company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, the ability to deal with rejection, right, without losing enthusiasm is like the key to success, right? Because I mean, you guys know, I mean, you're gonna have failures, you're gonna get rejected. Not everyone's gonna see the same viewpoints as you. Not everyone's gonna agree with you, no matter what it is, right? It's like, I mean, you could be talking about the most, you know, charity-driven type of thing, and somebody's not gonna agree with it, right? So it's like, you have to be able to like deal with those rejections without losing your enthusiasm and motivation, and keep pushing forward, right? And I mean, you had that experience a lot doing door-to-door sales, very fast, right? Because it's like, you know, the first year I did it, that was a thing that was really, really hard. And for most first-year sales guys we have, I always tell them, I'm like, look, this is going to be the hardest thing that you deal with. It's not even the sales. It's not even any of that. It's just going to be keeping your enthusiasm up while getting rejected. Like,
what's the percentage of guys that actually finish who start in the summer? On average,
30%.
30% finish.
Wow.
Yeah. So usually it's like 70% of the guys that you sign up to go out for the summer will show up, and only 30% will usually finish.
So how does that pay structure work? Is it salary plus, hey, you go get a deal, you get
100%
paid?
commission.
So they're incentivized to go out and do well and push through that rejection.
So one of the ways that this kind of whole door-to-door thing is sort of structured that I think helps it, right? Like, is, I mean, you got to be put into an uncomfortable situation, right? So it's like, we are typically, for any of our locations, right? Like, we're not going to be really going and recruiting guys from Charlotte to work in Charlotte. We're going to go recruit guys from other cities and bring them to Charlotte. We put up, we rent, you know, lease a bunch of apartments. We furnish them. We put them all up in the apartments. If they hit certain sales metrics, like, then we would, you know, basically cover the rent for the whole summer for them, so they don't have to pay for it. Otherwise, it's deducted out of their commissions. But the thing is, you got to take people out of their comfort and comfortable environments, put them into an area where they're not comfortable, right? Because that kind of helps force growth. But then also, you don't have those, you know, the kind of like voices in the back saying, you know, like on a hot 98-degree day in humid, you know, Charlotte, you're out there getting your teeth kicked in, and your buddies are in the summer like, man, pool party's popping off. Like, yeah, the girl's here, you need to come. You're like, do I really want to go knock 100 more doors, or should I go to the pool party, right? It's like, so if you have that kind of there, it's very easy to just be like, detour, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that really works is we kind of would structure it where we would try to take them out of their environment, put them in an area where the only people they know are all the same guys on the team who are all going through the same thing, and they're all out working, right? So it's like, what else are you gonna do? You're gonna go work. But it's brutal still. I mean, so first year guys, I mean, a lot of them are young, man. It's like, you know, even if you're not young, you're very inexperienced with dealing with that many like different personalities that quickly. You know, and it's like the emotions get super high, like pretty quickly. Like, there's many times, like, dude, I would like be on the side of a sidewalk, sitting down, like crying, just like, dude, what am I doing? Like, you know, and it's just like, pull yourself together and be like, okay, dude, we got to go get this, right?
30% is actually higher than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
For amount of people that finish. But that makes sense, because you're pulling them entirely out of this other environment to a place where you're like, all right, you're kind of only giving them one option.
Yeah.
Like, obviously they have other options they can quit.
It's
but
like
it's
succeed
making
or
it
fail.
hard
Right.
for them to quit. What do you do? So I'm just curious, from when you're leasing these places and then you see this significant drop off, like how does that work with the agreement with the complexes and stuff?
I mean, that's, kind of a downfall. Like sometimes, I mean, that's kind of some of the price you pay, right? So, I mean, sometimes you can work with the apartment complexes and kind of close them down a little bit earlier. But most of the time you just kind of, I mean, we're usually just trying to negotiate like 3 to 4 month leases. So it's like, usually it's maybe like an extra month or 2 that we pay for. Or we'll try to, what we will usually try to do, and this is kind of a resourceful thing, right? Is, you get all these sales guys. As the summer progresses, each person individually will usually start selling more accounts each per day on average. So it's like, then the service numbers need to go up higher, right? So it's like, what we'll always try to do before we send somebody home is like, if a guy can't make it in sales, we'll be like, hey, look, we'll pay you, blah, 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 whatever, cover your apartment for the rest of the summer, stay, and just go service the houses, right? So you try to convert them into service technicians, so that way you don't have to hire a full-time person and then maybe have to drop them at the end of the summer, right? You don't want to do that. But then you also don't have to, have an empty space in an apartment too. You try to do that as much as you can.
Are they reluctant to take that position coming out of like a sales type of role? It'd be like, I don't want to go.
No, because otherwise it's like, I mean, they go home with making no money.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, okay, you can go home and you can have a good amount of money in your pocket, or you can go home with nothing. Right. So it's like, some just go, but then a lot of the guys, I mean, a lot of their buddies are there too. So it's like, they kind of want to stay and hang out. I mean, when we create like a really, I mean, the whole summer is like pretty intense, like fun, exciting, competitive environment. So it's like, you don't really honestly want to leave that though, right? You got like a big brotherhood of guys, we're doing barbecues, like, company dinners, each week that you can earn, competitions, incentives and stuff like that. So it's hard to like be like, oh, let me go leave and, just go back home and not do anything.
Yeah. Did you have employees come back summer after summer? Like continued? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had a really, really good retention, on returning guys. But you also have like tiered structures, right? So it's like each year they come back, they kind of get higher commission percentages. Usually then they'll start recruiting some guys themselves from their colleges or whatever, kind of build their own little team. They get kind of overrides on those guys. And then from there, they kind of have this little team that they're sort of also helping lead. And then we had a sales partnership program. So if these guys could work up through the leadership structure and have a big enough team that was good enough to like produce a certain amount of revenue, then they could qualify for partnership, where when we would open a new location, they could, get equity in that branch. So it's like, it was really, really cool, man. Cause like when we did sell the company, I mean, I think we created maybe like 5 millionaires at that time. And then, the potential future ones, there's probably like 10 total.
That's phenomenal.
So it was like, yeah, I mean, some of those kids were 21.
Can you disclose what the sale price was?
I can't. It was like middle 8 figures.
Cool. Cool.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So-
Congratulations.
It was good.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Congrats, man. I'm sure it's still been whirlwind of dealing with that the last year or so, and we'll get into that here in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole, other story, right? And I'm sure, I mean, there's some, when we dive into it, I'm sure you could relate, like if you were in those same spots too, right? Because it's like, you build this thing from nothing, right? And then it's like, you get to a point where, you're potentially going to lose it, or it doesn't really fit what you wanted anymore. It's not really like meshing with you, but it's like, this is my baby, right? Like, this is my thing. Like, I'm not just going to, like, I can't just give it up, walk away from it, And so I was like, really, when me and my partner were having a lot of fights, it was like, I had a really hard time being like, no, like, dude, this is like, I started this thing. Like, I'm not walking away. But then, you sit and reflect and you're like, dude, is like, I mean, first of all, that's my ego, right? It's like my ego's telling me like, you're the only one that can do this. This is your thing, da-da-da. But then it's like, I'm like, okay, like, let's look at your mission, like what your purpose is, like what your vision and goals are. Does Aruza have to be in that? Or if Aruza's in any of those goals and vision statements right now, could you extract Aruza and put something else in there and it still be the same? And so when I realized that I didn't need Aruza to fulfill my mission, then I was like, okay, fine. Let's move on from this. And that way I can kind of realign and refocus myself. But then when you step away from that, it's like, man, I've been grinding for 6 years. And it's like, now I'm not doing anything, right? It's like, woo, that's hard, right? Like for people like us that are like we work a lot. And I mean, honestly, a lot of our work grind is probably, help is an addiction that's kind of helping hide and mask, which I'm learning now is like my work ethic has been an addiction that I've used to hide my depression and mental health issues, right? And so that's when like really everything started kind of like hitting me when I like slowed down and had enough time to like for everything to kind of like, it's like you're speeding freaking car, you stop and then everything in the trunk like slams in the right. It's like
the whiplash.
I'm like, whoa, okay, here we go. So that was really interesting, right? Like kind of going into that new stage or season of life, and since then everything's like it's been kind of a whirlwind, and I'm sort of just kind of pulling myself back out, right? But I always go back to like the mission, right? Your purpose, like that's been the one thing that's like always kept me like grounded, and probably kept me from like losing it or whatever, suicide or who knows, like that type of stuff, right?
What is yours?
My purpose is I want to like help people achieve all their goals and financial dreams and become financially free. So I had there's this weird thing. And I always feel weird talking about it because, I don't think anybody really likes talking about these things, but there's this thing that I always think about that it's like, is kind of like my overall arching, like a goal, right? So my grandpa, was a very successful business owner, built a company, a few hundred employees, was like super loyal to his people, always took care of them, could have walked away from the company, multiple times, but it's like, never did. He always wanted to make sure his employees were taken care of, right? When he passed away, we were at his funeral, and there was just like lines of people, when they like, hey, does anyone want to get up and say something, right? And I mean, I've only been to a few funerals. Like, I'm not a funeral kind of person. I'm like, I don't like that stuff. But so many people got up and just told of these like touching stories of like how my grandpa had impacted him. And I'm just like, dude, like that is the ultimate goal. Like, how many people are going to get up at your funeral and say that you touched their lives or impacted their life somehow, that somehow catapulted them to a better version of themselves? So like, that's really like what I'm shooting for. And maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. I won't know because I won't be there.
I love that though. To me, that's a legacy.
Yeah.
A legacy is how you make people feel. It's not necessarily how much money you made or what car you showed up in. It's how did you make these people feel when you had the ability to impact them in their lives? And that's exactly what that is. So that's a cool story to hear.
So I'm not really sure exactly how to make all that happen, but they say it's like, most people are going to pay attention and really actually learn from your actions. So it's like, I always try to make sure that somehow I'm keep pushing forward and I'm doing things. But I think, the new business I've started, I think is really going to kind of help me. It's really aligned with that overall goal, right?
Yeah. Just to backtrack a little bit. So this is definitely something I wanted to touch on before when we were chatting about this. I love the fact that, I don't think you're going to take offense to this, but essentially you grew a boring business, right? There's more exciting opportunities out there, but this is kind of something that's been around for a long time. It's boring. Nobody really thinks about pest control. Probably don't think about starting a pest control company. So my question to you is, how did you differentiate? A lot of people talk about, let's take these boring businesses. For example, I think her name's Cody Sanchez on Instagram, always talks about like find the boring businesses and then put a twist on it, bring in some kind of technology or some kind of spin. Is that how you thought about it? Did you grow it in a non-traditional way or just tweak something slightly? Or did you guys just do great work? Like, what was it that differentiated you as you continued to grow your business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The thing is with pest control it is a very traditional type of business, right? It's very, you know, old boys club type of thing, right? And what's interesting, I mean, so, you know, there's a good amount of door-to-door pest companies now, right? A lot of them are from like Utah and stuff like that. A lot of the LDS, you know, Mormons are.
Why is that?
Well, they go on their mission for 2 years and they knock doors and, you know, obviously preach, you know, the church, the religion and stuff like that to, you know, help people find God. And so they're doing that for free for 2 years and they come back and they're broke. And, you know, it's very easy to say, okay, I've just been knocking doors in some other foreign country for 2 years. Now I can come back and I can go knock doors and make $50, $70, $100,000. Like, okay, cool.
Makes
right.
sense.
And so it's just kind of a natural thing. So it's like, it's funny, like you go to like Provo, Utah, or like Salt Lake City, Utah, you can't like go to a Chipotle without seeing like 10 door-to-door companies, like trying to recruit, have lunches with different, I mean, cause you got solar, security, pest, alarms. I mean, dude, it's like endless, but yeah, so still even to this day, door-to-door is very non-traditional in pest control, right? Like if you go to a lot of pest control, like events and things like that, a lot of these guys that have been in the industry for a long time, like, dude, they despise door to door, but it's making a huge impact now. And if you do it, the problem is there's a lot of companies that don't do it the right way, right? So it's like they're to where what a lot of these companies are is they're a sales company that happens to do pest control. My goal was always to be a pest control company that just happens to use door-to-door sales, right? And so that's kind of how we built Aruza, to where it's like, okay, look, we wanted to have really high standards for our sales guys, right? Because most sales teams will allow their people to go out and just like sell whatever, right? It's like, you know, lie to the people, say whatever they need to try to get the deal done and stuff like that. And it's like, we were like really like adamant about not doing that, right? And so we had a lot of standards to make sure that the customers were always taken care of and that the reps weren't lying or saying bad stuff. We did the highest level of services we possibly could, which most of those companies are going to just try to bust out services super fast. And then my biggest thing was, I would always tell my team and customers, it was like, look, no one's perfect. Like, we are going to make mistakes. And what will make you stay with us, though, is how we like come back from those mistakes. Like, that's where we will amaze you. It's like, we're going to make mistakes from time to time. Stuff happens. No one's perfect. But what will make you stay with us is like how we make up for those mistakes. And so it's like, if somebody had a complaint, bad review online, it was like, everyone on deck, get this fixed, whatever we got to do to take care of it. Send them flowers, send them, things, whatever. It's like, to where it's like we would just go over the top to make sure we made up for anything, right? So I think the big thing that I was always kind of focused on, and is one thing that I'm still really focused on and trying to always like identify how we can do better. And I think technology is a huge thing that can help with that, right? And technology really just the last 6 years is kind of, maybe 5-6 years, has kind of moved itself into pest control, right? It had a little bit of software stuff, but it was really rudimentary like 6-7 years ago. Now it's getting a lot better, to where you can have a much better customer experience, right? But it's like, a lot of these home service blue collar businesses, dude, their customer experience is horrible.
Trash.
Like, I don't know if you guys have ever called plumbers or contractors or any like home service business. One, it's like, can you even get them to answer the phone, right? Two, it's like, are they even going to provide you a quote or pricing or actually tell you what they do over the phone? And then are they going to show up on time? Are they going to actually do a good job? It's like, are they going to follow up? Like, dude, a lot of these companies don't. So it's like, that leaves a huge gap right there where you can really kind of create a difference if you just find all those little pieces in the journey that people, most of these companies don't even care to look at, and figure out how you can make that better.
I love that you brought it up as the customer experience, because it doesn't matter if it's pest control or video production, which we do, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And like, we look for opportunities out of our fuck ups. So we'll fuck up and then we'll say, okay, it's kind of like a point system, right? Like, you give them what they're expecting out of the transaction, you stay kind of level at 0. You fuck up, all right, it's -5. But you make things right, it's +15 and you're +10 on the board, because there was a mistake, but you went above and beyond to correct it. So now they like you even more than if you wouldn't have fucked up and you just did what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how you kind of take it to the next level and think, okay, we're going to mess up. It's inevitable, but these are opportunities, right? These aren't just something that we have to eat,
Yeah.
So,
Well, then you look at that mistake too, and you're like, okay, was this like a mistake on the person? Like they knew what they should have done or whatever, and they just messed it up? Or was there some sort of miss in the system or process that kind of created this, right? Because if it's something in the system, then you can fix that. And then if you can fix that, then you should never really usually have to experience that same mistake again, right? And so that's part of the reason why technology and these software can be so great, because you can set up a lot of those different tools and reminders or SMS messages, campaigns, different things to where it's like, I mean, a lot of these businesses can almost be completely automated, if you have the right software and take the right time to set those things up. But most people don't, they get kind of stuck in the weeds. They're selling jobs, and then they're having to do jobs themselves. So they can't step back and like focus on the bigger picture. Which, I mean, it's hard to do, especially if you're a smaller business.
Yeah, coming up the last 6 years or so, do you remember distinct pain points during your expansion where it was like a sticking point, where it's like a little bit of a plateau, whether it was a certain threshold of amount of people that work for you? I've heard of like employee thresholds where it's almost like there's a really difficult pain point at 4 people. There's another one when you get to 10 to 12 people, another one at 40. Shit like that, where your systems kind of have to internally change because your infrastructure wasn't built for the amount of people that you're adding. Do you remember significant points where you're like, damn, this is getting harder and harder as we're scaling?
Yeah. Man, I think there was a lot of those, but I'll try to think of a few. I mean, definitely in the beginning, I mean, I think some of the first ones, especially for the industry I was in, right? It's like we had to have service vehicles. So it's like having the ability to like get financing or credit to like get 20 vehicles, like real brutal, right? Like huge hurdle to try to figure out and try to navigate. I was very fortunate enough to where, a guy from Enterprise, fleet management, he took a big gamble on me and he saw the vision. And so he went and kind of fought to his team to help us get secure with some vehicles. My chemical rep, she saw the vision, and so she really kind of took care of us as well too. And I mean, that's one of the big things about the CEO or the founder of a company, right? Is you need to be able to the vision of the company should just come off of you like all the time, right? To where it's like people should just be like drawn in, right? If you can't get people to draw into the vision, then you probably shouldn't be the founder or CEO. You might want to put somebody else in place, which is totally fine. Some people are, people who are able to do processes, be in systems, but some people are the visionary people who are going to just bring people in, right? So it's like, I mean, it's not bad to be one or the other, but hiring was always a big one, right? So it's like, when we were smaller and still even probably up to like, 30, 40 employees, like I still had maybe a part in a lot of the interviewing and hiring process. But then after a certain point, it's like you just can't be a part of it, right? So it's like, you have to the problem is it's like you want to make sure you're hiring the right people too. And so coming up with like really good hiring and interviewing processes was really, really important. So I spent a bunch of time creating these like candidate evaluation forms where I identified a bunch of different questions that kind of fit different categories of like the person that we would be looking for, right? So most of these were kind of trying to fit our core values to try to find the person with the best character and who would fit the best within our organization. And so you'd have all these different questions, and then what I would do is I'd have like some sort of like observation scale, kind of either just like had nothing to do with the question, or it was like in answer to the question, right? So, for example, like one of the scales would be like, did the candidate come in looking professional? Did they shake your hand, look you in the eye, like, introduce themselves, professionally? One scale of 1 to 5, right? Some would be like, the question would be like, have you ever had a time where you had to step up beyond the call of duty, and did you receive any recognition for it or something like that, right? And it's like, then the observation would be like, did the candidate step up and do something without needing to receive recognition for it, right? Because like some people will do stuff, but they only do it because they want recognition. And unfortunately, you're not always going to be able to get recognition for everything, right? Some things are going to get missed. And so it's kind of good to understand that people will just do things just to do it because that's just who they are. They're not trying to seek something out of it. And so then you'd scale, rate them on the scale, right? So it's like, I went through all these questions, created all these observations that I'd identified would help us know exactly what type of character this person was. And then we, made a system where we would only eligible candidates were 4 or higher on average of those scores, right? So like then all my managers would interview all their candidates with those candidate evaluation forms. So it's like if I knew we were hiring somebody, I knew that they were at least a 4 or higher on that scale. So that's like, then I could feel comfortable and confident about it, right? So that was a big process. And then obviously, when you have like 50, 70, 100 employees, HR becomes a very, very big thing. Proper payrolls, time record keeping, it's like, I've experienced every little thing road bump you could probably think of while building, because it's like, dude, we grew from 0 to, we did 12.5 million in 2022, right? So it's like from 0 to 12.5 million of revenue in 6 years. That's a lot. And so you got to move real fast. And I can promise you, you're not setting things up perfectly as you're moving that fast. You're just like trying to get things done. And then all of a sudden some big bomb blows up and you're like, okay, let's fix it. Now we need to do something to make sure this never happens again, right? So it's like we had to deal with some federal Department of Labor complaints, like, a bunch of different stuff like that. So you learn really quickly, like how to make sure, you obviously want to really take care of your people, but you need to make sure that everything is like dialed in, right? Because it's like, you just never know. COVID was pretty interesting too, right? Like 2020. So, we had a couple hundred sales guys signed, and what was it, March or February 2020?
Yeah.
Is like all that stuff happened, and we're just like, dude, what? I'm like, me and my one partner were just sitting there, we're like, we got 2 options. We either just like shut the door-to-door program down this year, so because it's like, okay, how are we're gonna have all these guys come out, put them in apartments, have them going door to door when there's like all these shutdowns and da-da-da. Like we were very blessed that pest control was deemed an essential service, right? And we shut down for a couple of weeks because we had some employees, get sick kind of right around that time. And so we kind of shut down, try to figure everything out. And then we started kind of bringing everyone back. But we had a decision. We were like, okay, look, we either shut down the sales program and just kind of, take any new customers we can as they come in organically and just service what we have and try not to lose any. Or we just say, fuck it, and we just go for it and hope for the best. We're like, we got nothing to lose, so fuck it. And we lost a little bit of sales guys because their parents or whatever wanted them to come out. But dude, COVID was huge. Because everyone's at home. These parents are trapped with their kids all day. So it's like somebody comes and knocks on their door. They're just like itching for somebody to talk to, right? You're like, oh my gosh, another human as an adult, that I can actually have a real conversation with. And it's crazy. And then the other thing, which I didn't even really think about, but makes complete sense looking back now, is most people are not really home a lot during the day, right? They're kind of in and out of their home, or maybe they're gone for a lot. When they are there, they're super distracted. So it's like, pests and insects, they don't want to be around us just as much as we don't really want to be around them, right? So it's like, if you're not paying attention, there'll be insects maybe in your house and you're moving around, they're going to dart away before you maybe even catch them, right? But when these people were at their home all day, dude, they started noticing these insects. They were like, I've never noticed all these bugs. They're all over my house. I'm like, well, they've always probably been there. You just never noticed them because you're not slowing down enough to see a spider in the corner, right?
Was that one of your better years, COVID?
So, yeah, probably. I think we had like a 400% organic growth that year, which was pretty insane. Because everybody was calling, and it's like, you'd be surprised, dude. You'd think like, oh man, all these people are going to be concerned. It's like, hey, look, like we're not servicing interiors right now. They're like, you need to get inside my house. We're like, okay, like we'll do it, right? It's like, but I mean, so these people didn't even care. They're just like, COVID or get these roaches out of my house.
Well, you're home all day, to your point.
Yeah,
they don't want to be home
out of my
with
house.
All the bugs and.
Dude, I know, but it's just funny how like quick people's perceptions switch where they're like, okay, I don't care about COVID. You need to come in here and you need to kill these bugs. Right? So yeah, I mean, our sales teams, dude, they did great. You get a lot of like some the random complaint reviews or random things like, you got guys out here going door to door during a pandemic. It's like, I mean, but we had the guys, doing, they wore the latex gloves, they wore masks, they had sanitizers, instead of signing agreements on the iPads, we would send it to them digitally and they'd sign it on their own phone. So like we did a lot of things, and that was part of the technology, right? It allowed us to kind of make those shifts pretty quickly to where we didn't have to, do a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah, it worked out really, really well. Like, I mean, yeah, it was probably one of our biggest growth years from year over year.
So you get through COVID. When did the exit strategy begin? Was it a planned, hey, let's over the next 2 years?
It wasn't planned. No, I can't. I mean, we always had the plan to like kind of do that sort of exit, like private equity or like, self-finance it to like bring somebody from the company kind of up and give them the CEO position. But that we kind of had like maybe 5 to 10 year timeline. But it was like end of 2021 that, we kind of, got to a point where, we were like, okay, we need to do something.
What was that process like? Start to finish?
It was long. A lot of work as far as like gathering all the data and financials and metrics and all this stuff. And
did you all start the process or were people reaching out to you?
I mean, dude, people were reaching out all the time, but we started the process. We hired a broker who's specialized in pest control. He was great. So they kind of gave us a list of all the information. They kind of put all the decks together, kind of went out and, pitched the companies. Then you start talking to some of the companies, and then you start negotiating, and then you sign an LOI and kind of agree to some terms, and then kind of go into deeper due diligence and stuff. So, I mean, from the time where we like signed an LOI with the company, I mean, it was probably like 3-4 months before we were able to like finish and close the deal. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of times where I thought everything was just gonna like fall apart right there, because it's like it gets so tense, and then it's like, if everyone's not getting their way, it's like, right? It's like, I'm like, dude, we just need to just get this to the finish line, right? But we ended up getting it there, and it worked out really, really well. But yeah, it was really stressful, especially because it's like I couldn't really do anything about that process, right? It's like you kind of just have to like roll with it.
Yeah, it's tough to probably influence that once it's in that system, right? You kind of have to, here's all the data, here's the information, like here's what we think it's valued at. Hopefully it works out mutually, but if not, like it is what it is. It's one of those things.
Yeah, we knew we were in a good position because the Carolinas is like the hottest pest control market in the world right now.
No way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Why is that? Because of climate?
It's just a perfect, basically the perfect region, right? Highest probably, I think it's kind of the highest growth rates right now too. Another reason is, and I don't even know if this is actual reason, but I think it might be like, so Terminex, so you have kind of multiple Terminex. You have Terminex International, which is like the big publicly traded Terminex. And then you have like some Terminex franchise locations. So North and South Carolina are actually owned by Terminex franchises, which keeps Terminex International from entering North and South Carolina. So a lot of these big top 10 companies that are, compete with Terminex and stuff, they want to be in the Carolinas because Terminex can't get in here, right? And so you have a lot of big companies who are big on the acquisitions and mergers and stuff. They're coming here to buy some sort of platform company that they can just start buying all the little ones and rolling them up in, right? So, and we were perfectly positioned to do that, right? We had great brand recognition. We had, over 5,000 5-star reviews online between all of our locations. We were in Raleigh, North Carolina, Greensboro, Greenville, South Carolina, Charlotte, Columbia, Charleston, Orlando. So it's like we had like all the major markets. So it was perfect for somebody to come in and buy and basically use that as their platform to start buying companies and rolling them in, which the private equity group and Aruza now, they've just started that. So they just closed their first acquisition with a company here in Charlotte. And I think they got, a few more kind of in the pipeline that they're working on. So, so I knew we were in probably one of the better positions of a company to be that for someone, right? So it kind of gave us a little bit of, power, right? To where it's like we could kind of, navigate that a little bit more, control it a little bit more.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Love it. So you sell the company, and then you're like, you were saying you're going crazy because you work however many hours a week for 6+ years, and then you're like, company's done. Mm-hmm. What did you start to focus on? I know it's been about a year, I guess, 10 months at this point?
I kind of started I tried to start focusing on my health again, right? And that was kind of like, give or take. And then the problem is, and I think this is kind of part of my downfall, right? Is it was like, okay, I need to get busy right away, right? Which I wish I almost kind of would have took a little bit of time to kind of settle in and let everything sink in and then kind of, move into the next season. But I mean, you have that hunger and you have that drive. So you're like, okay, I got to just get going again. So I've been working on my new company, Growable Ventures, which is like the thing that I'm super excited about now. And so I've kind of had been building that a little bit, kind of started doing a little bit of work there. So Growable Ventures the mission of Growable Ventures is to basically help home service entrepreneurs become financially free, right? So it's like really kind of attached to that mission I have of like helping people achieve their goals. And so what I'm looking at doing is partnering with, pest control or home service businesses, and sort of providing consulting, coaching, capital, support, and sort of helping them grow and scale their businesses, to where they can exit them or whatever makes sense for their goals, right? To where they can achieve everything they want. And so I have a target of creating 20 multimillionaires in 10 years through their business. And so I've partnered with 2 pest control companies already, one in Tennessee and one in Arizona. And so they're kind of in the smaller startup phase. So working on kind of trying to integrate them and figure out, the process of taking a business, bringing it into, a part of Growable Ventures, and then how to, from there, like know exactly, okay, what are the most important things that need to be done first? And then on what sort of timelines do we need to execute on these things to kind of bring them where I know they need to be to like scale, right? So that's kind of the big process that we're going through right now, is trying to figure all that out, which is a lot of work. I mean, and it's a lot of new stuff too, right? Because it's like I've never really done, acquisition or partnerships or
consulting.
Things of that nature. Yeah.
And is it just you, or do you have partners that came in with you?
So this is kind of like this is like my basically the company that I'll use to sort of make investments in and things for probably the remainder of my life.
Got it.
So I have no partners. I do have an employee. She was our customer support manager back at Aruza for a while, and then she kind of left for a little bit to get a better job. And then when I kind of ventured off and did this, I sort of brought her back over to sort of help me with, a lot of administrative, operation type of stuff. So she helps me a lot. So it's just the 2 of us,
Love it.
Yeah.
How are you going out and recruiting different businesses? You say you have 2 right now. How are you going out and getting them?
So I'm kind of like set at the 2 for right now. I don't want to try to stretch myself too thin. That's something I kind of learned running Aruza, was there's a healthier way of doing things than, just going all in, So I'm just doing the 2 for right now, but those 2 have came from just my network, right? I mean, similar to what you guys do. It's like you post your stuff. You have a niche on social media. People obviously follow you. I mean, honestly, the podcast, probably what created a lot of that network for me, is when I did the Pest podcast. But my future, marketing lead, generation is going to be my YouTube channel, where, the YouTube channel, and I haven't launched it yet. I mean, we kind of talked about it, I think maybe, but because I really want to do a big studio part of it too. But I want to have multiple layers in that channel, where it's there's the podcast where we talk about business, growth, mindset, things like that. But then I want to do complete behind the scenes of building these companies, processes, things that we do, issues, troubles, hurdles and like how we just give that stuff out to as many people as possible. And maybe it helps them, maybe it doesn't, right? But then it's like, those are the things that will attract a lot of the people you want, especially for this type of, business, right? It's like, I'm looking for people who want a partner to help, provide the support for them, right? And so it's like, they come to my page, they're seeing all this stuff, like, dang, this is what he's doing. Like, man, I could maybe do it, but like, that's intense. Like, I should probably reach out to him, right? And see if maybe he can help me. So I'm hoping to get that launched sometime next year, but I'm also kind of working on, I'm slowly working on kind of putting the plans together for a new home service company here in Charlotte that I'm going to launch. Still kind of looking for the right partner to maybe come in on it with me, to like run the operations day to day and stuff. But I'm not going to talk about it yet, but I think it's going to be huge. And so I'm really excited about that. So yeah, man, I mean, I'm all in for the blue collar, dirty businesses, the non-sexy stuff, and just make it sexy.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. So I'm sure you paid yourself pretty well before, but obviously, coming into a large sum of money is life-changing. Mm-hmm. How has that transition been for, 99% of us who will never experience that or have not experienced that in your life? Like, I've heard people say money just makes you more of who you are. So if you're a shitty person, you're going to be worse with money. If you're a great person, maybe it makes you a better person afterwards and you give more or whatever it may be. What can you speak to as far as your experience in the last year of, making a decent living, making a good income, but then coming into a large sum of money and just being like, holy shit, what do I do with this now? Yeah,
that's a good question. And I think I'm in a position in my life now where there's like a lot more to that, right? Like, so yeah, you come into this money and I agree. I believe the same that you do, right? That having more money just enhances characteristics that you already have, right? Because it's like, you talk to a lot of people and they're like, money makes you evil. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like, if you're a giving, charitable person, you have more money, you're typically going to give and be more charitable. If you're a dick and an asshole, and you get more money, you're just going to be a bigger dick and an asshole, right? But what a lot of people don't understand is like, money, it doesn't fix anything though, right? And I always kind of thought it would, right? Or like make things a lot easier, but I don't think it does at all. Now, one thing it does do is it provides kind of that freedom, right? And the freedom to do for a lot of different things, right? So it's like freedom to take time, freedom to do things a certain way, freedom to, put more care and effort into your body if need be, right? Like, which is a big thing I'm kind of doing right now. But it doesn't like fix anything, right? And so, I came into this money, I just got married, right? Like, things were crazy. They were moving super fast. We go buy a house, my wife quits her job. We're, whatever, blah, 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 doing interior design, building a pool in the house. I mean, dude, and it's like, none of that really fixed what was like going on inside of me the whole time too, that I really probably needed to fix like a long time ago. And so I think it kind of maybe enhanced those moments, like, and pushed that stuff out a little bit more. And, then it kind of, this last like 6 months, I've kind of just had this like downward mental health spiral, to where, me and my wife were having a lot of issues. We were doing marriage counseling. I mean, we've been together for 5.5 years, but we had only been married, not that long at all, right? Mm-hmm. Had a bunch of issues, fights, and then, we ended up separating in April. I haven't seen her since end of April. I fell into like super deep depression, man. And so when that happened, it's like, I took the time to step back, and I'm just like, look, I need to I've been ignoring all this stuff going on, like pushing, guys, we just like push that stuff away. It's like, no, everything's good. Keep going, right? It's like, I literally had this motto like through my whole life that it's like, look, I'm a European speed train, right? It's like, I'm going 200 miles an hour. If you're with me and you get off the train, no chance you're probably going to get back on. Can't focus on what's behind me, can't focus on what's, I'm passing right now because I can only focus on what's ahead of me, right? Which that's how I lived most of my life, which is honestly super toxic, right? And I'm even like going back now through a lot of these like sales, hustle, motivational quotes and things like that. I'm realizing like how toxic some of these quotes are that most of us like live by. It's like we come up through our careers and we're like, go big or go home, or like, right? It's like all these different things. And it's like, dude, these are really bad. Like, so I really tried to slow down. Now this is where, so obviously money, I think kind of sort of exacerbated a lot of that type of stuff, but money is also giving me the freedom to, okay, I need to slow down. Let me just like sit in this. Like I need to feel all of this, right? Because I haven't felt any of this my whole life. And so then I kind of just dove into researching and reading and like learning, because that's how I kind of helped build Aruza too, right? It's like, come across a problem, okay, get a book, read on it, figure it out, right? So it's like, I've read, since starting Aruza, I've probably read like 300 books, mostly on business, leadership, entrepreneurship, stuff like that. Over the last 6 months, I've read like probably 30 books on mental health, trauma, men's depression, brain health, and things like that, to where it's like, dude, I learned a lot. So the big thing I realize is like males typically there's like 2 types of depression, right? There's covert depression and overt depression. So males typically have covert depression, where it's typically buried deep inside, and it's usually being hidden or covered by addictions, which most of these addictions take some form of like creating a grandiosity, like, bigger image of ourselves, self-image and things like that, right? So it's usually like exercise, fitness, work, alcohol, drugs, substances, food, all that types of addictions that, we can use to kind of make us feel bigger, feel better about ourselves, right? And then that keeps that depression kind of shoved down and pushed away, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I'm feeling kind of bad about myself. Put my head down and work harder, right? It's like, how many times have you probably said that to yourself? Like, dang, this sucks. Like, okay, I'm just gonna work harder. Like, right? Everything will be fine, right? And then women are typically overt depression. It's very outward, right? It's like you see that they're sad, they want to talk about their feelings, they're crying, it's all coming out. But the problem is like covert depression, you can't heal it. The covert depression has to become overt depression before you can actually like heal the depression, right? And so like, dude, when me and my wife separated, like, boom, I got hit by a train. I was like, whoa. I was like, this is what depression feels like. And it sucked. And I'm doing a lot better now, but I've made a lot of work to kind of improve that. But man, it's brutal. So, I've been going to a trauma therapist, which for guys, like that's like super hard to do, right? Like for me, like counselors or therapists were always like, when I was young, I was kind of a big trouble kid, like ADD, like super hyperactive. My mom was single mom. So I was obviously a lot to handle. And so she, there was a few times in my life growing up where, things got really crazy, where like she just was like, I can't do this, right? And so she would like go take me to a counselor, and I'd have to sit there with this counselor for like one day ever. And it was like, the worst. So it's like, to me, therapy was always like a punishment. So it's like I wasn't usually gonna go put myself in that as an adult when I had the choice to do it. But I was like, okay, look, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in my life. I need to figure this out, and I need to talk through it. And so I've been doing the therapy, and I quit drinking in April, and so I've been just sitting in my stuff, exercising, doing a lot more fitness. Health stuff, dieting. I went to, I don't know if you guys have heard of like Dr. Daniel Amen on Instagram. Mm-mm. So he's a big like psychiatrist. He's got these podcasts. Where he does like brain scans of like all the famous celebrities, football players, athletes, things like that. So his big thing is like doing these brain scans, right? To like identify like your brain health and how that's impacting your mental health, right? So his big thing is it's not mental health, it's brain health, right? There's things going on in your brain that are causing these mental health issues. So I recently went and got the brain scans done, and which was actually kind of really cool, right? Because it's like you can literally see, and you could see all the stuff going on in there that it was like, yeah, this is why I'm having a lot of these issues, right? And a lot of them were like post-concussion trauma, right? Like mountain biking and doing extreme sports as a kid. I mean, I had like 4 concussions. So you could see all that damage in there from those concussions. You could see the ADD like clear as day in your brain, right? That was super crazy. But and you can see all these areas like lit up really, really with high levels of activity that shouldn't have high levels of activity that are typically, show PTSD, trauma, anxiety, irritability, anger, aggression, stuff like that, right? And so now I've started on some new medicine. I'm taking like a ton of supplements and stuff like that to try to sort of heal my brain. And that really helped a lot. But it's like the biggest thing I've learned through all of this is like, dude, men, we need to talk more about our crap. Like, dude, we need to be more vulnerable, which is super freaking hard. But what I've also realized is as a male, if you are vulnerable to your friends, then it creates a safe place for them to become vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, with all this stuff going on, people are like, oh, how you doing? And it's just like, I'm like, look, I don't freaking care anymore. Like, I need to talk about this stuff, right? So it's like, I just start talking about the things I'm going through. And then it's like, boom, all of a sudden they start opening up and they start telling me this stuff and these trauma and these things that have happened to them. And all, I'm like, and it's like, dude, like you got the same stuff, right? It's like, look, take my advice, figure this out now before something happens that you can't go back from like I am. Like, look, I could have dealt with this years ago, right? And it's like, I didn't, and it blew all up in my face, and now I'm living in my house by myself, right?
But it took this whole journey for you to finally hop off the trade, going a million miles an hour, to reflect and be like, when I don't have all these distractions, this is what I'm harboring. I didn't even know it the whole time.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about going from covert to overt, the primary piece I'm getting out of that is the communication aspect of putting it out into the world, whether it's to a therapist or whether it's a loved one or a trusted person.
So no, it's not even really like the outward like communication part of it. It's that fact that it's like, with covert depression, you're pushing it down, right? But what you're really pushing is like the feelings of the depression, right? The sadness, the loneliness, all those type of feelings that like physically you're feeling and mentally you're feeling, right? And you're doing that typically through these addictions that are spiking dopamine, spiking serotonin, spiking norepinephrine, right? Adrenaline, like a big thing for me as a kid, like I was an adrenaline junkie. Well, now I look back, I'm like, dude, probably that was because of my ADD and my brain issues, right? Because it's like you need those dopamine spikes, to make you feel good. So it's like you go, try to find something crazy to do. Working, healthcare, like taking care of ourselves, right? It's like we try to make ourselves feel better. I mean, man, this is the reason why a lot of people end up turning to drugs and alcohol too, though, is like it numbs all that. So you don't even feel the feelings, you're just numbing it, right? So you think it's helping you, but really it's just elongating and making the problems worse.
Way worse.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, you're addressing the symptom and not the root cause, which could be, to your point, ADD or childhood trauma, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You bring up a big word, I think, that as men is not often discussed, which is vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So being vulnerable, first of all, I appreciate, you being vulnerable on this podcast, but in your mind, like what is the reason that men are not, outwardly vulnerable, like women, not to generalize by male versus female, whatever, but just outwardly speaking, like typically women are better at speaking about their feelings just naturally.
Yep.
And as men, it's like not as natural for whatever reason. So in your opinion, like why are, or why do men feel such a difficult, challenge getting vulnerable and being vulnerable, without being prompted?
I mean, that's a really good question. Honestly, I think that's like a generational thing, right? I mean, obviously, if you look back, the thousands of years as males, it's like, you're the provider, you're the leader, you're the head of the household. You got to hold everything together. You're the rock, right? It's like, and if you're, our dads and their dads and their dads and their dads, right? It's like, they're coming up like that. And so then they teach their sons that. And it's like, so it just passes down from generation to generation. That's like, you're a man. Men don't cry, right? Men don't talk about their feelings. Like, you just work, you provide for your family, you do this, you put your head down, you don't complain, right? And so it's like, I mean, if all these generations are raised with that same type of stigma, it just makes it really hard for men to be vulnerable, right? Because, you know, there's no safe space, right? If there's no safe space, most men aren't going to feel comfortable. Because one, it would take, first of all, it takes a lot of confidence, I think, at a certain point to be like, you know, very vulnerable with some intense stuff, right?
Totally.
And so it's like the average person's not going to just come out with that publicly. And, you know, when a lot of men probably have over the past, right? It's like, you know, the news or the media or whatever just rips them to shreds, right? So it's like, you know, I think our, you know, the way, you know, the way the world's been created, or people are kind of, men have been put into this certain mold, has kind of created that. I feel though, over the next, like, you know, few generations, that I think that's going to shift, right? I think men are understanding there's a lot more issues with mental health, how, you know, it's more important to be vulnerable, deal with this type of stuff. You know, as much as us as men can start creating more safer spaces to like be vulnerable and like feel our emotions and like learn how to like describe our emotions, and then maybe when we have kids we can help them learn that. I think then we can maybe like change this. But till then, I mean, it's like everyone's gonna still want to be the macho man. Like, I don't have any problems, I'm good, like I'm still holding together. Like, you know, I always think of like the duck, right? You know, when a duck's in the water, you think it's just floating, right? It's not floating. So it's like they look super calm and just still on the top. But if you look at them underwater, their feet are constantly kicking. Dude, that's men. Like, we try to look super calm and put together, you know, on the outside, but inside, like, there's a lot of crap going on, you know? So it's like, that's tiring. It's exhausting, right? So it's like, dude, we got to learn to like let that stuff and go and deal with it.
Yeah, I agree. And you talked about, and I think this is actually how we met, right? Is through you addressing, you know, a few different things. But you talk a little bit about how you're kind of overcoming, you know, your challenges from a mental health perspective. Obviously the NAD, which is how we met through, you know, Invigory and getting IVs, ironically. You talked about sauna and, you know, cold exposure and these different supplements. Can you kind of talk through that, of what your regimen looks like to address not only physical health, but mental health as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, usually first thing in the morning, I'm like I get up pretty early it's still pretty dark. So then I usually like read for like an hour. Then I do like 45-minute walk outside in the sun. I've kind of stopped wearing SPF or any of that stuff because I don't want to like block. I want to get the sunlight in my body, especially like try not to wear sunglasses as well too. So it's like my body can like really absorb those lights. From there, it's like I'm taking right now some supplements, taking like GABA, which is like to help kind of like, you know, slow down anxiety, things like that. I'm taking like curcumin and saffron. And then I'm taking these like brain power blends. So they're the supplements from Amin that he kind of recommends, but it's like a lot of like, you know, ginkgo, DHEA, EPA, like the omega oils, that's a big one. I'm taking, you know, different hormone supplements and stuff like that, you know, because as you get older, it's like, I mean, mental health is big if your hormone levels aren't in check. And I mean, dude, I mean, this would have to be a whole other podcast that we would have to get down, but you know, the food and all the chemicals and stuff in our environment, our foods and the metals that we're absorbing all the time. I mean, the stuff that does to our hormone systems and our testosterone levels. I mean, you think you could still have high testosterone levels because maybe you're only 30, but you may not, right? And so it's like, it's good to get those checked and make sure those are in balance. So I work with a doctor to make sure all my hormones in check, my blood levels are in check. So a lot of supplements, you know, and I don't know exactly what's all in there, but then I do, I'm doing dieting, like specific, you know, fat, carb, protein ratios. So kind of focusing more on fats and carbs than fats and proteins versus carbs. Especially like fats and proteins in the morning, and then kind of add the carbs in a little bit later throughout the day. And then I'm actually, so I've been doing the NAD stuff. So that's actually like, really helped. Like, dude, very like good clarity that you get in your brain.
Can you explain that to people who are listening who may not know what that is?
So like NAD is like a naturally occurring enzyme that is typically built up in your brain. And then as you kind of age, you know, usually after 30s, those levels start depleting, right? And that's going to help kind of protect like protect from like oxidative stress in your brain. It's going to help kind of with like your, dopamine and serotonin levels and kind of helping keep those balanced. It helps with like anti-aging ability. I mean, there's so much to it. If you do a lot of like, caffeine or supplements and things like that, it's like it can kind of help like rebalance some of that stuff. And so, I mean, really, I'm like kind of like dialed into like this like longevity health span type of thing right now on top of like my brain health as well. So I'm kind of combining a lot of that. And so like really I started the NAD mostly for the kind of the anti-aging benefits, but then I realized like how much benefit it has in the brain and kind of like helping with depression and mental health and sort of kind of helping bring those dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin levels back to normal. And so, I started doing it, and hey man, if I can do something like that and it can help me perform or be better, then great. But it's interesting. I mean, and then plus you can load up a bunch of vitamins in there too when you do it, and it's like 100% absorption. Like all these supplements I'm taking right now, and this may be like weird to share, but it's like, I'm sure you guys know, it's like, dude, my pee is like fluorescent green all day, right? It's like, okay, like I'm taking all these supplements, but I'm maybe only absorbing like 30%, right? It's like, dude, literally like green.
I haven't had that problem. I do take beet powder before I run sometimes, so it looks like I'm pissing blood, and I have to remind myself, like, bro, it's the beet powder.
Like, dude, I'm just like, if I'm like at a urinal, I'm like, yo, bro, don't look at my pee. It's all right. It's healthy. It's the vitamins. Someone look at it and be like, bro, you need to go to the hospital.
Yeah, call a doctor. Yeah.
You need to go to the hospital. So it's like with the IVs, or the drips, you're going to absorb all of that, right? So it's like that is a huge thing for me. A new thing I'm about to do right now, and this is more for the brain health, but there's obviously a lot of benefits to this too, is I'm ordering I'm going to just rent it because my one doctor prescribed me like 40 hours, but I'm ordering like a hyperbaric oxygen therapy tank. So I'll have that at my house. So I'm going to rent it for like 2 months. She prescribed me like 40 hours of the therapy.
And how long of a span? 40 hours and...
So she said typically 60-minute sessions. Like
16 or 60?
60. And like 3 to 4 a week typically. But I
think
think you can go up to like 90 minutes. But
I'm very curious to see the results of that.
Yeah.
Very curious.
Yeah.
I've heard it helps with like physical injuries too. Like, well, I remember.
So like with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and I don't know them all, but there's 13 symptoms that your insurance companies will cover, and a lot of that is like open wounds, burns, things like that. It helps them heal faster, right? But it also helps with like pushing more oxygen into your brain, which can help with like healing the trauma and the low activity levels and getting better blood flow into your brain and kind of helping to like, revive some of those areas that don't have the activity or blood flow right now currently that they need it more of. And so that's kind of the big area that I'm going for. But I mean, there's a lot of other reasons. I mean, a lot of endurance athletes, they're doing, hyperbaric oxygen therapy for elevation purposes and stuff to kind of train their body to like perform at higher levels, recover faster. The one thing I really haven't gotten into yet, and I don't know if I can, is like the cold therapy, dude. Like I hate cold. Like, I don't know if I can do it. I feel like I probably need to, because there obviously is so many benefits to it, but I'm just like,
They're about to bring a cold plunge to Invigory, actually.
Really?
They're building one out in the back.
Nice.
So, and it's not just the cold plunge. They're putting a hotter sauna than they currently have. So it gets up hotter. You do it quicker, and then you go back and forth. So I think one session's like 15-minute sauna, 3 minutes cold plunge, 15-minute sauna, and that's like one core treatment, which I'm super stoked about.
Yeah. I'm about to get an infrared sauna in my house. I'm just trying to find the right size to try to fit it somewhere. I don't even know where I'm put it, but because I don't want it outside, because I don't want to have to like go outside in the morning to do it. But I'm gonna get one of those and do the sauna, because like a big thing for me, like fear, like my grandpa died from Alzheimer's, so it's like Alzheimer's, dementia runs in my family, and it's like I am going to try to avoid that at all costs.
100%.
And I think NAD actually helps with Alzheimer's as well too, like in the long span. I'm also taking one of the medicines I'm taking that I didn't really talk about, which I think is pretty huge, is the MSM, or no, not MSM, sorry, metformin.
Got it.
Metformin is typically like for diabetics, to like help with type 2 diabetes, which I initially got prescribed and started taking because, you know, I was on the Lexapro medicine. I was on higher dosages. I got off Adderall to try to get that out of my system. And so then I like was putting on a bunch of weight. I still wasn't really working out well. I wasn't eating good. And my body fat got to the highest it ever had. And then I got diagnosed like pre-diabetic, right? So it's like, and I wasn't like super unhealthy, but I'm like, what the heck, dude? And so I started the metformin, started dieting, started exercising like consistently again, and really committed to it. I got that levels back down, but there's so many like anti-cancer and anti-aging benefits they're finding with this metformin. Now they're not like, you know, it's not what it's prescribed for, but so, I mean, I take that every day as well too. And I'm going to probably continue taking that, you know, forever. But, I mean, dude, I'm just looking for anything that I can do that's going to impact and like help me like live healthy and young as long as possible. Right. So it's like, that's kind of a big thing. I think I was just talking with somebody about it the other day is like, you know, over my life, I've kind of, as I've evolved or changed my way of thinking, I've changed the way I've looked at, like, I don't know if you guys have ever done like timelines of your life to kind of see what everything looks like, right? It's one of my business coaches a few years ago kind of made me do this, and it really like put things into perspective. And so you kind of like, you know, start the timeline. This is where you're born, and you kind of draw a line and you go to, okay, this is where you feel that you're at now, right? So you draw a line there, and then you like, okay, now you draw a line until where you feel like you may die, right? So it's like maybe 80, 85 or something like that, right? But when I was in high school, I think we even had this like, and this is a really weird assignment in a class to do, or a question, right? Like, when do you think you're going to die or something like that? I don't even know why schools would do that, but I thought I would die by the age of 25, right? Because I was like, you know, did a lot of extreme sports. I did stuff crazy. I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, at some point my luck's going to run out. Like, right? Like, I'm not going to make it past 25. Well, then obviously I make it past 25. I get, you know, slowed down in life a little bit. I get a job. I start being more responsible. Like, okay, like, look, you know, where my grandparents are, things like that. Okay, so maybe like 85, right? 80, 85, like maybe, you know, who knows? I've still been pretty hard on my body, so maybe it'll be sooner. But it's like now, like studying everything I've been studying and about this longevity and health span stuff, I've shifted where I think that I can get to at the end of my life. And so now I've kind of set my end goal at like 125. Right? To where it's like, then when I redraw, so it's like when I look at my timeline where I'm at now and with all the crap that just happened, right? It's like, boom, it's like, okay, you're 36 years old and your whole life just kind of fell apart in front of you. Like, yeah, you got this money, but you also then realize when all that stuff happens that you don't really care about the money, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, look, my wife, I'm not with her anymore. Like, my whole life, this sucks, right? Like, I don't care how much money I have in the bank, but it's like, so my whole life falls apart at 36 and I'm looking at 85. I'm like, man, I'm like halfway there. It's like, I don't have much time, like, right? But now I expand to 125. It's like, dude, I got a lot more time to like make big impact in this world. And so that's kind of been one of the big, like, kind of mindset changes. And so then it's like, you know, when I was younger and I thought my lifespan was going to be till 25, I made decisions and did actions based on I was only going to live till 25, right? So it's like I was a lot more reckless. And, you know, then, you know, now it's like I would make more decisions based on, oh, I'm only going to live to 85, right? Or even if it's like you're talking financials, like planning for my retirement, I'm going to live to 85, health, life insurance, health insurance, right? All that crap. But it's like now it shifts to where it's like, okay, now I got like, I don't know, 70 years or 60 more years, you know, on this earth that I can provide impact. Like, okay, I need to like really step this game up. And you realize like, dude, I'm just barely getting started. Right. This is like the beginning. I mean, everything else was the warm up. Like, I'm just getting started now.
125 is not that far fetched with technology and everything.
No, I mean, so I've read some stuff and I don't know exact kind of the timelines, but they believe that sometime within the next decade, we're going to reach this like health span continuum accelerator type thing where, you know, basically once we get to that level, it works the same how, you know, transistors or whatever have worked, where it's like the microchips, how they 10x every year for the last 50 years. So it's
Yeah.
like they've gotten more powerful and smaller, every single year by a scale of 10x or 1,000x or whatever, right? So once we hit this thing, they say that for every year that you're alive, the medical advances will be able to extend your life by 4 years. So it's like, if that happens the next couple decades, I mean, dude, we'll all still be super young. And I mean, obviously we live fit, healthy lifestyles. You guys by far way more than me. So it's like, by that point, I mean, dude, you'll still be rocking and rolling. It's like, then if you could just extend your life 4 years every year, it's like, dude, 125, easy.
It's crazy to think
Right?
about. But to your point, you mentioned both health span and lifespan, and that's an interesting concept,
Health span
right?
is the most important part, right?
Totally.
Right? Because it's like you have a lot of people now living to 100. I mean, there's a few 120-year-olds that have been around. But like, dude, I mean, they got high blood pressure, they got high cholesterol, they got diabetes, they got Alzheimer's, they're bedridden, they can't get up and down stairs. Like, dude, the last thing, I want my life to be like, so if your health span's up here, right, and this is like your lifespan line, and this is your like health span, on the vertical axis, I want mine to be like this. Like,
yeah.
I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'm living life, and then all of a sudden, a week, 2 weeks, something hits me and I'm done.
Yeah.
Right? Which is how it was, which is how I think it always was back in the days before medical science kind of came around originally, where now we treat issues as they come. So, right? So it's like we're just elongating the health, right? We're elongating these people's life because we have medical technology that can keep them alive with these illnesses once they have them, right? Versus like trying to prevent, we're not focused so much on the prevention, right? Because companies don't make money on the prevention. They make money on the, the cure or the, elongate, keeping it subsided, right? But I mean, think about like, cavemen, Indians, like things like, people who have been around before that type of stuff existed. It's like, I mean, dude, their lives were very active every day. And usually lifespans were what, like 45, 50 back then. But usually it was like some sort of like natural environment thing that would kill you, like an animal, or you fell off a cliff or whatever, But it's like, or they would get some kind of disease and it would kill them instantly, right? So it's like, they didn't elongate their, they weren't bedridden for 10 years, before they died, right? So it's like, we've now gotten to a point where we've just elongated the longevity, but we've drastically decreased the health span, right? So it's like, I want to just focus on having that health span until I go.
Yeah, we've increased the lifespan with decreasing the quality of life through the lifespan.
Which,
at the end,
what they say is one of the most important, which is one of the most important metrics to kind of determine this health span is VO2 max. So it's like having a high VO2 max.
I've heard that.
No way.
Basically kind of will dictate like how healthy you can live for a long time. Yeah, I'm sure you're good.
My watch has got me at 60 right now, which I feel like
there you go.
is low.
No,
60
that's
is
actually
pretty
good.
Yeah. So I think like, I think Lance Armstrong had like a 120 VO2 max or 100 something VO2 max.
I'm curious. I actually need to go get it checked because I don't know how accurate this actually is.
Yeah.
I just have been avoiding the test because it's fucking brutal, but I need to.
I've never done it, but they say it's the most brutal test in the world.
Are you familiar with how they do it?
Yeah.
The clinic.
I watched Nick do it.
Yeah.
Did you?
The hormone clinic I go to has one of the VO2 max.
Nice.
Yeah, dude. They hook you up. You get on a bike, hook you to the thing, all out for 12 minutes. Like, brutal, dude.
I need to get hooked up with a clinic though, because I want to see where my levels are at.
Yeah.
I just want to get more peace of mind than anything, but just see where I need work.
Yeah. And
just it's more peace of mind and just having a baseline so we can go from there.
I mean, at a certain age, it's like you need to get your blood work as a man, like male. I mean, really anyone every year, to be honest.
Yeah. Or multiple times.
Yeah.
If not.
I mean, you just don't know what's going on, and it's like most of the times everything will be kind of in line, but you never know. Yeah. And it's like, that's the big thing is like finding these things or these subtlety changes early that you can then work on before it becomes one of these issues that now you're just dealing with or you can't get rid of, right? So health span, that's the key word.
Yep.
But I mean, like I said, it's like looking at this longer level of life now, it's like, man, I get pretty excited because it's like, dude, I'm just getting started, and now I've got a lot. I'm starting from a way higher foundation level than I did the first time, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's like I feel like I'm starting all over again, but I'm really not, right?
Well, I love it, man. I think that's a good place to wrap up. You got anything else?
Good. No,
Yeah.
this has been great.
Dude, thanks for having me.
It's been awesome, bro.
Heck yeah.
I like how we circled back, started kind of with that, and then circled back to it.
Yeah.
So where would you like people to follow you? Where can they keep up with you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, just at Soloman Airhart. Soon I'll have my YouTube stuff launched, probably hopefully next year, but otherwise, yeah, just follow me on there.
Cool, brother. Thank you.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your support on each and every episode of the Hybrid Human Podcast. It really means the world to us. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with new content moving forward.